Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for being here on this Career Tip Tuesday. I am Resume Lezlie, and since this Tuesday is the second Tuesday of the month, I am doing my Behind Hiring interview series where I try to bring more transparency to the hiring process by interviewing recruiters and former recruiters, hiring insiders, and other experts who have a unique perspective on the hiring process. Also, since this is January and we've just started a new year, I'm focusing a lot of my content this month on mindset and laying the groundwork for having success in the goals and the plans that we are laying out for ourselves this year. And that is why I am so excited today to speak to my very first guest for the Behind Hiring series, Nii Ato Bentsi-Enchill. He is a holistic career coach with a ton of great content and information to give us. His unique background spans everything from psychology and mental health to recruitment and HR analysis to career counseling and so much more. So without any further ado, I will go ahead and bring in Nii Ato Bentsi-Enchill. Nii Ato, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Leslie. It's a pleasure and an honor to be your first guest in your new series.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Like I said, I am really excited to have you here. I have been a fan of yours since the very first time I was ever made aware of your existence on a podcast. So I really like the content that you share and the way that you share it and sort of the mindset that you bring to it, coming from that holistic perspective.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. If you're trying to make a brown man blush, you're on your way, definitely on your way. But I appreciate, the positive feedback. It's been great, interacting with you on LinkedIn as well.
Cool. Well, excellent. I am certain that you can explain your background and history more eloquently than I can, so I will let you do that here in just a minute. First, I want to see if maybe I can make you blush just a little bit more and tell you a few of my favorite things about you that I have learned since starting to interact with you a year or so ago. So a few of my favorite things about Nii Ato. The first one actually came out of the very first time I was made aware of your existence, and it was through a podcast. I think you were on Mark Anthony Dyson's podcast, and you were on with like 3 other guests as well.
Yeah.
And I had tuned into that because one of the other guests that was on was somebody that I had already interacted with. And I was like, oh, great. I want to listen to this podcast. And the whole thing was great. The episode was great. Everybody had really good content to share. But the thing that I noticed about you when you spoke was that you have this sort of calm wisdom and clarity of communication that just draws people in. At least it did for me and my partner, Andy, when we were both listening. It was like, wow, who is this person? And I want to get to know this person more. So as soon as that episode was over, I went and found you and connected with you. And that was kind of the start of getting to know who you were. So before I had any idea about anything about you, that really stood out to me. And it was something that I have seen sort of continue in your communication and your posts. And when you show up on podcasts, I love the clarity and sort of the calm wisdom that you're able to share your thoughts with. That's really great.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate that. And I hope I can bring the same into today's conversation. I'll do my best.
Well, I'm confident you will. Don't worry about it. A couple of other things that I just really, really like and are some of my favorite things about you, Nii Ato, is your holistic approach is something that I hadn't heard a lot about necessarily when it comes to careers. And it was something that as I was starting to know you, I was also starting to get into career change coaching on my end. And that was my first sort of foray into coaching. And I started to see how important it is to take a holistic view of your client, job seekers, and for job seekers to take a holistic view of what they're trying to do with their careers. So when I started to read more about that from you, I really liked it. And I can't wait to dive in a little bit further into that today.
Yeah, definitely. I'm happy to. And I mean, why don't we just start with, what holistic means to me? Defining terms is always important, right?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and so when I speak of myself as a holistic career coach, I think it's because I, view all of us as whole human beings, and I don't see the benefit or the help of compartmentalizing different aspects of our lives when I do my work with my clients. Using myself as example, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a brother. I have all these different roles, and that all those listening have several roles they play themselves, whether they're parents or not. And all those roles play a factor into how their job search and the career development is going to happen, whether we are consciously aware of it or not. And so I try to pay attention to the personal, the professional, and the psychological when it comes to working with my clients as far as the job search is concerned, as far as career advancement is concerned. And big part of that is because the job search and career advancement are very emotional in nature. There's a heavy psychological impact, and I don't think those aspects are spoken about enough when it comes to the advice that's given out there. So when I'm holistic, I'm trying to support the client as best I can in those different areas. And I'm looking for integration is the word I like to use. I've spoken about not being a big fan of the term balance, in your work-life balance, for example, because balance requires perfection on both ends. Ultimately, it's about integration. How do all these pieces fit together? And that's what I'm hopefully trying to drive for when it comes to holistic coaching.
Excellent, excellent. I love that explanation. That's really great. Is that approach something that was sort of natural to you as you got into your own job searching? Or was it something that came out of the things you learned through your education or earlier career experiences?
Sure. I think it's a mix of things. I think just as a person, I, am naturally curious about people. Um, and when I connect with people, I just want to know their origins. What's their origin story? How did they arrive as the person I'm meeting, today in front of myself? And I just really value the stories that people have within their lives, and hearing them so I can understand different perspectives and all of that. But also a large part of it comes from my training and my career, to date. My first job out of college was in human resources. I was working at Merrill Lynch as an HR analyst, and I was in the learning and development department, so doing training and supporting the professionals in the investment banking and trading, departments or divisions, as far as their professional development. Then I moved into recruiting, and so I worked for a company called Isaacson Miller that does recruiting for nonprofit and higher ed clients. And in that capacity, I learned what it was to build a candidate pool, try and meet, the needs of the client who is the institution that we're working for, and trying to, match this gap that has occurred for them, with a human being who can really take them to the next level. From there, I went to grad school. I think that's where I really got formed the basis of my approach and my viewpoint now. And in my program, I have a master's in psychological counseling. And in that program, not only was there a huge emphasis in multicultural competency, which is something that carries through with me today, I was also introduced to career development in that program. I wasn't expecting it because I thought I was just going to learn how to be a therapist. But of course, if you're working with adults, what do adults do? The biggest activity of our lives as adults is working, and so you need to know a little something about career development theory. Which led to an internship at Baruch College here in New York City, for those who are familiar. And that's where I really got the foundation of what I do today. So big credit to Baruch and the senior leadership there. It was a really unique model in that all the senior leaders at Baruch were PhD level counseling psychologists. And so I had the chance to volunteer at NYU's Career Center and also worked, my graduate internship was at Baruch. And so the models were completely different. And so if a student walked into my office at Baruch, the first thing I did was not to ask them, what's your major and what are you trying to do when you graduate? I did a genogram with them, mapping out who's in their family and understanding what education levels were already in their family, what career influences were in their family, and sometimes even conversation about values or pressures came out in those conversations, helped me to understand why this really artsy student is an accounting major right now. Well, because their immigrant family and their first generation college student, well, it's safe to go into the accounting route. That's why you're doing accounting right now, versus them maybe following a passion. And so learning that there's so many influences around how people construct their careers in that setting during my grad internship is what really helped me to sort of flip a switch in my mind in terms of, okay, it's not just, this straight line path about, your major to your career and all this thing. There are all these influences, conscious and subconscious, that might be feeding into your career choice, what you think your choices are, the directions you go, what you think is not available to you, and even the stories you tell yourself in this process of looking for a job or trying to advance your career. Um, and so grad school is really where I think I start to build that. And then where I really kind of, cut my teeth, as they say, or all those, generic random ways of saying how you gain experience, was at Ivy Exec, where I was a senior career advisor for about 4 years. And in that role, I was interfacing with mid to senior level executives across the globe and across industries, helping them to troubleshoot their job searches, advise them on their career advancement, review their resumes, all this stuff. And so just hearing thousands, I spoke to over 5 or 6 thousand people in that role. And so I heard a lot of stories, and I heard all the similarities that, and challenge that people face. And a lot of it comes down to what's going on up here and what's going on in here when you're going through a job search. And, the nuts and bolts, may vary here and there, but there's some core things. But yeah, I mean, that's where I really kind of gained this perspective, in that you can't separate the person, their personal life and other things from the career process, because they are integrated, they're linked, and so that's where I got to where I am. And I continue to just try and push that forward in my in my work today, so that people can be their most authentic selves in their job search. That's what I'm looking for.
I love that. That is so great. And for me, it's been a struggle sort of crossing that line working with clients, because for a long time, even just as an employee working for other companies, I had this very distinct sort of mental barrier between, okay, this is what work life is supposed to be, and this is what, I am as a human, and I can be all those things outside of work, but I can't be all those things inside of work. And I love that you brought up the sort of whole human aspect. It's something that I sort of started touching on and realizing last year, was that companies are starting to be more open to hiring whole humans, and who that whole human is. It's slow, and I think it's small, but I think it's something that's starting, and it has allowed me to maybe push some boundaries with clients, where before I was the one that was holding back and like, oh, that's not professional, I shouldn't ask them about their personal life. But what I realized was, once that idea started kicking around in my head, and once I started talking to clients a little bit more and just asking feeler questions to see if they're comfortable talking more about that, and sussing that out with me, what I found is that they were, and it was really more helpful for them, and it really allowed me to get a more full picture, and to help them find the things that were going to make them happy. And so it's new for me, and I love to hear you talk about it with such sort of confidence and in-depth knowledge about it, and coming from all the sort of various pieces of your background. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks. And our job is create the space, for those conversations to happen. So the more comfort you gain with it and I gain with it, the easier it is for our clients to enter into those conversations with us.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. That is excellent. One more thing, just on the whole human sort of front. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Madison Butler. She calls herself a former recruiter, a recovering recruiter, actually. And she is really big on, she said when she was a recruiter, she really tried to get to know the human in front of her. And now what she's working to do is help companies do the same thing and come at it from that perspective. So I love that you're out there talking about this, and that she's out there talking about a lot of similar stuff. That gives me hope that the job search and the career world can start to transform more towards being accepting of humans as who they are, and let the business be better because of that.
Yeah, definitely. 100% agree. And Madison Butler's content is really great.
Yep, totally agree with you. Okay, so Before we get too far away from what your sort of background in recruitment and HR was, are there any behind the scenes tips or juicy details that you find you're able to bring to your clients who are job seekers and in their careers that they are surprised about or that they didn't really know before?
Sure. Oh, in terms of working with recruiters?
Yeah, just anything
Yeah.
about the job search that you
Mhm.
had, a little bit of an insider knowledge on, or that you share with clients where they go, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way, or I didn't think of that approach, or something like that.
Mhm. Um, I mean, it's gonna sound, I guess, super cliche, but we make our business, I guess, talk about networking. And it's surprising, that still, to this day, people aren't, as aware as they should be of the power of networking. And
Mm.
so, though I kind of leaned into how overspoken about it is to start this out, it's necessary because it's the truth. It's our job to tell the truth to job seekers in terms of what's going to work best for you. And so the fact that, to this day, people still start their job search by going online, whether it's to Indeed or to LinkedIn or what have you, that's not the best avenue for you to go through. You have a very slim chance of getting plucked out of obscurity when you apply online versus going through a human. We're talking about humans and being our whole selves. Well, people hire people, humans hire humans. And so your best bet as far as progressing your job search is to speak to other people. We'll talk a bit more, I think, about this later in terms of how to apply some of these holistic viewpoints to your job search. But if you think about it, the best way to learn in detail about a potential employer is to speak to someone who works there, or if you're aiming for a certain career and making transition, to speak to someone who's done it before, because collecting lived experience of someone else is going to be far more powerful than anything you can read online. We have to remember that companies' website, their press releases, these are sanitized versions of the reality that they want you to believe and perceive about their company, what it's like to work there, versus the lived experience of someone who did work for that company or has tried out that job and has been in it for 5, 10 years. And so, to everyone who's listening, it's not to say don't do your research online, don't use the resources. No, definitely not. But you should be heavily focused on connecting with human beings, because that's when you're really going to get a good appreciation of what the ins and outs, the realities, the negatives, the positives, all those things are. The nuances of working somewhere or working in a certain job is through a human and not through reading it online. So it might not be the juiciest tip, but I just want to lean really hard into it because it's really important that people really get this and do it going forward.
Yep, I agree with you. And I think that it gets more and more important kind of the further we go, into the future. There's so many people out there looking for jobs. The job market can be very volatile and unpredictable. And creating a network for yourself, not only that you can sort of reach out to and utilize to learn things about, but people who also get to know you and get to like and respect you and have maybe the opportunity or the likelihood to be in your corner and back you up and recommend you for something or refer you in for something. It's so much more powerful than I think a lot of job seekers realize. And I think a lot of
Yeah.
job seekers back off from it because it seems intimidating and it seems
Hmm.
scary. And I totally get that. I think I've talked to you about doing live and me
Yeah.
personally putting it off for so long because it was scary and I didn't want to do it. And still, every time before I go live, I get like jitters and butterflies in my stomach. But then now that I'm on
It's
here
because
doing
you
it,
care.
and what's it? Well, yeah, definitely. But it's good for my business. It's good for job seekers out there. It's good for
Hmm.
my sort of mentality and well being. So I do it even though it's scary. And I think that networking is one of those things that if job seekers can get over the scariness and just start in little ways by commenting or sending a message when they read something from somebody that really touches them or just anything like that can start conversations and build relationships in a way that can be really beneficial to you and to the people that you're networking with.
Yeah, 100% agree. Putting yourself out there is scary. I remember putting, hitting us, publish on my first article on this
Mhm.
platform, and
Mhm.
it is nerve-wracking, but you never know the reaction until you start putting yourself out there. And what you have to say is going to be unique. It's going to be value added, and there will be people who will connect with what you have to say. And so don't hide your light from the world. Please share it, and there are going to be people who will be attracted to it.
Yes. Oh, I love that. That is so important. All right. You talked a little bit already about finding the intersection of skills, interests, values, and life experiences, and then creating a path toward a satisfying career.
Mhm.
Um, how do you recommend a job seeker get started with that process if they've never kind of thought of their career that way before?
Sure. There are two specific things I tend to do with clients, especially those who are in exploration mode. One is what I call an accomplishments exercise or a 7 stories exercise. This is actually something I learned back at Baruch and have carried forward, ever since. And the other one is a work-related values exercise. So those are two exercises that I often start with. Uh, Taking the first one, the accomplishment exercise, it's really important to do a retrospective on your career at different points to understand what it is you've enjoyed doing and also what you're good at. I think most professionals are fairly, aware of what their strongest skills are within the job they've been doing for a while or the different things they've done. They have a decent idea of their core skill set, but often people haven't thought about, okay, what's my core skill set in relation to what I enjoy doing within that core skill set. And so the first intersection is the skills you're really good at plus the skills you enjoy using most. And when you find that intersection, that will allow you to start more proactively building your career and your job search in a way that's going to um, benefit you ultimately in the long run. So in the work setting, let's say you're really good, I don't know, let's say researching, right? So whatever capacity that looks like in your world, you can volunteer and take on more and more projects that select for that. You can build up a
Mhm.
reputation in your business of being great at researching and developing certain types of insights. And you start to create a brand or reputation around that. And so you proactively volunteer. Now you're going to start getting selected for those type of projects, and then you can start gearing your career towards doing this over and over, in that it becomes like a self-fulfilling cycle of prophecy, in that you are getting better and better at the thing you really love doing, and then you just can start to build a career on that. And then when it comes to job search process, you can start to select for and aim to target jobs that select for that skill set that you are really strong in, and that might be the core of the function that you're aiming for. And so, for example, I'm speaking to a gentleman right now who does qualitative research and insights for really big brands on a consulting basis. And he loves digging into people's stories. He loves writing up, their experiences and how it can practically feed into development of products. And so if he continues down that line, he can continue to get known for and select more projects in consulting. He can go in-house, what he wants to do now, to continue doing that work. But he's identified that he really loves to do the qualitative research. He loves writing stories, and he's also really good at it. And that's going to be a career that is going to be sustainable and have longevity, and he can really build something with that and develop a brand. So that's that piece. What do you like and what are you good at? Identify those, you're good to go, or you will be. And then regarding the values are really stable guide points across our lives. Yes, they can change and evolve over time, but typically they're pretty stable. And so when it comes to your job search, I think values should lead your job search, because where you end up is going to be influenced by, how where you end up and how long you stay will be influenced by the values that you hold. And so if you're someone who really cares about integrity, but you're working in a company that cuts corners all the time, you're going to be really unhappy and be looking to exit, as soon as possible. But if you'd done a job search ahead of time, where you'd prioritize your values, you would have searched for a company that aligns with your values, supports or even promotes the values that you hold, and that's going to allow you to feel integrated, supported, and be bought into what the company is doing for the long term. And so you surface that by doing this exercise that I get people that has a set of work-related values listed. You rate, how important they are to you, and then select a few that are your most important values. And from there, here's where the rubber meets the road, if I'm not getting too far ahead, is that you can then generate questions based on your values to screen employers by. So this is an example that I pulled up. I wrote in my notes because this client did such a great job. Um, so there's several different work-related values. It might be security, it might be recognition from superiors. In this case, it's adventure and risk-taking. That was a value for him in his work. And so the question he came up with, which was excellent, was twofold. What kind of risks is the company willing to take and tolerate for new ideas and projects, was his first question. And the second question was, is there a certain amount of CapEx set aside to advance these areas? Those are dope questions. Like,
Yeah.
those are really dope questions. And those questions arose from his knowledge of his line of work. You know, he's been a COO, he's been a CFO, and he understands that money can be allocated for such things. So to align with his values, he came up with a question to understand the risk tolerance of the company, and if they back up their supposed risk tolerance with money to go and explore, that really means they're really invested in promoting and supporting taking risks and new ideas. And so if a company passes that litmus test for him, he says, you know what, that's somewhere I want to work. But it's only because he had this value-based question to ask in the first place to enable him to assess if that company would be the right fit for him. And so that's why values are a huge and really important way for an individual to guide their job search and then be able to screen an employer to see if they are ultimately a good fit.
Yes, that is such good advice. It's that golden nugget stuff that sort of just clears out all the fog and says, oh, that's how I can make that happen. So you identify the things that really are important to you, that make you feel good about your work, that make you come home at the end of the day and not hate your job, and that make you really proud of what you're doing. And then from there, you look at the pieces of that that are really great skills for you, which when I talk to clients, I kind of say, chances are most of the stuff that we really enjoy doing is because we're good at it. You know, we don't really enjoy stuff that we're terrible at, especially when it comes to like work. If it's a hobby, that's one thing. But when it comes to work, if we're bad at it, we usually don't love it. So it's identifying that stuff that we're really good at, that we also really like doing, and then filtering your whole job search, everything that you research, all of the opportunities that you potentially, you know, consider through that sort of rubric of, this is what I know makes me happy, so that's what I'm going to try and target.
Right. Yeah. And so it's not to say that we all, you know, not all of us are able to have a job that we're passionate about, right? And I want to be very fair and clear about that, because that advice can rub people the wrong way or make things seem unattainable, which is not what I want to do. But, you know, within your career path to date, within what you've been exposed to, what you've learned and all of that, there are going to be aspects of your job that you're better at and worse at, things that you enjoy more and enjoy less. And it's really just about bringing to conscious awareness what those things are, and then trying, you know, within your sphere of influence, which, you know, to steer your career in that direction. And we all have the power to decide, you know, to a degree, you know, what jobs we're going to pursue. You know, you can decide to put an application or not, and what jobs you're going to take, you know, within reason. And so you do have, I want to just empower people that you can, you know, take more control over your career development by figuring out what, you know, energizes you, what lights you up, and trying to pursue that as much as you can, whatever shape or form that takes.
Yep, absolutely. I love that empowerment, and I love that recognition that not everyone gets to have a job that they love, and that doesn't even have to be the only sort of measure of whether or not that's a good job for you. This is something that I've gotten into recently, and it's about, okay, so maybe you don't jump up and down every morning when you wake up because you're going to work, but that job doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, and it gives you the other pieces of life that make you happy. So there's a lot of different ways to use this holistic approach, and identify, you know, the pieces that make you happy and the skills that you're good at and all of those things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're trying to work towards the end all be all of perfect jobs for yourself. It just means finding the job that's right for you at the moment, that checks enough of the boxes that make you as a whole human, happier and content and satisfied with what you're doing at that point in your life.
Yeah, no, that's really beautifully put. And I think the word I want to extract from that is satisfaction,
Mm.
and contentment. I think that too many of us, especially in American society, are driven by this notion of perfection, which is impossible to achieve. It is. And so if we can, substitute the word perfection with satisfaction and contentment, that allows us to have a better overall quality of life, based on where we are. There's always more we can do or be and things like that. But satisfaction, I think it gives me a sense of peace, even just, saying the word and talking about it, because, it's an internal state of calm, of, I'll use the word balance in this context. But you feel, yeah, because you don't feel like, off equilibrium, internally about what your life looks like. So if you can seek satisfaction versus perfection, it's a much healthier pursuit in that regard for most people.
Excellent. Excellent. So good. Okay. So, on the topic of values and life experiences, which are two of the things
Hmm.
that you sort of bring into your holistic approach, I definitely agree that those are big parts of feeling happy in your career and in your life. On the life experiences, and I know that you identify as, and I'm pulling this from your website, a social justice advocate who uses his voice online and shows up in real life. I think that is really important, and I would love to hear more about what that looks like for you right now, moving into 21, for yourself and in your work with clients.
Sure. So if you were to examine my Facebook feed for the past, like, 5, 10 years, you'll definitely see a good number of posts that, relate to current events, especially around social justice. When I'm inspired or provoked or challenged, my default is to write my thoughts, and that's the best way I know how to share things. My father's a journalist, so the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Um, and so, without being, that's a job I do for free, right? If you want to talk about passion, things like that. So I'll just go and write my thoughts out, and share, my perspective on what's going on. And so if you look on my LinkedIn feed last week, I wrote about what happened in the Capitol and how, white supremacy and American exceptionalism were two of the factors that played into what we saw last week.
Mm.
So for me, social justice is doing my best to not be afraid to comment, especially on the LinkedIn platform. It honestly feels nerve-wracking sometimes when I post about, about race issues or social justice issues,
Mm.
but I know it's important. It's a relatively safe environment to do so, but also I'm a business person of one, and so that, could impact me. People don't, like what I have to say in this online platform.
Yep.
And so that's one way that I try to show up, is sharing my opinion and trying to influence those who I have a relationship with or those who I'm building one with to see another perspective and hopefully advance things towards the good. That's how I try and show up online. In person, I try to show up and march as often as I can. I've got a 9-year-old daughter, so it's not always the easiest thing to do, but I've taken her before once. But I do try to show up, in person. And then when it comes to my work, I think social justice in the career space is around bringing to light the challenges that BIPOC individuals face. That's a new term I'm wrapping mine around, but for those who learned for the first time, Black, Indigenous, People of Color is the new acronym BIPOC. To be more inclusive and recognize the distinct differences of experience that Black people and Indigenous people have had, the United States context. So it's about bringing to light the experiences of BIPOC and how they have to navigate the job search and career advancement differently than the majority culture. Um, and so it's talking about how we might receive more negative messages about what we cannot do within our careers, our career advancement and growth.
Mhm.
It is trying to support BIPOC in being more their full authentic selves as they navigate the job search. A
Mhm.
lot of my work has been recently articles around the stories that we tell ourselves. What is our inner voice telling us? What are other voices telling us? What is the story we tell to people because of what we've been impacted by? And so it's around trying to encourage, empower people to embrace their voice, embrace their uniqueness, and embrace what cultural values they have and differences, and use those to their advantage as they move forward to contribute in their workplace, in their job search, in their career advancement, all of that. That's what social justice looks like to me currently as I try to serve my clients. And I think it's about consciousness raising and empowerment is, I think, the two ways I describe what I try to do as best I can through my work, one-on-one and through LinkedIn.
Man, that's excellent. I really love that you are putting that empowerment into your clients' hands and trying to let them know and be more comfortable with expressing their true selves and pushing that into the workplace. Over the last year or so, hearing some fantastic people like you and Madison Butler and other people kind of talk about how it's okay to be your true self in the workplace and how that can be even more beneficial to the company. That really sits strongly with me, and it's something that I try and keep in mind when I talk to my clients now, and I will continue pushing forward on that. And I really appreciate you sharing that and sort of being a person who isn't afraid to go out there and let that be part of your platform. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So over the last year or so, I know that there has been a larger focus on social justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace. Have you seen any major changes or even kind of small changes that have come into the job search specifically, or that your clients are dealing with now that that is starting to come forth more so than it has in the past?
Well, I know that some of the DEI consultants that I'm connected to are crazy busy. And so, with good reason, and hopefully it's not a, superficial cosmetic effort at the moment.
Yeah.
But, long-term changes will take place as a result of the increased awareness. Obviously, these issues have been with us forever, but there's more attention, more focus on it right now. Not too much is filtered through to me just yet in terms of concrete changes that have been made, but I'm hopeful that two areas that get impacted are on the recruiting side and on the interviewing or hiring side. Back when I was doing executive search for universities, for example, and also the nonprofits, we'd meet with the search committees, and more often than not, the search committees were overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male. And so if the same individuals are still making the decisions or are the gatekeepers in terms of who gets employed, it's going to take a long time for things to change if the people in the room don't change.
Yep.
And so hopefully, action is taking place on that side in terms of diversifying who's doing the recruiting. As humans, we tend to hire in our own image, and so we have to be, cognizant of that fact. There's a headline I read recently. I meant to read the article about if AI can solve, recruiting bias, and then, it. I wish I'd read it so I can comment, more in depth about it. But I'm skeptical initially because we have to remember that human beings program the AI. Algorithms are written by humans, and so if there's bias built in the algorithm, the AI is not going to resolve the issue about bias in hiring. And so we got to be really careful about what goes in order to get the output that we want, in terms of more diverse candidate pools. On the recruiting side, we definitely need to diversify where companies recruit from. Kamala Harris went to HBCU. She is currently the Vice President of the United States. Joe Biden went to, Delaware State or University of Delaware State School. So you can find incredibly smart, brilliant, accomplished people in historically Black colleges and universities and also in state schools. You don't have to exclusively recruit in Ivy Leagues or the baby Ivies. Or, I went to Hamilton College, a small Northeastern liberal arts school, great school, no shade on my school, but it wasn't the most diverse place in the world, And so you can, easily, without much effort, shift where you're recruiting and get the pipeline in that you claim doesn't exist, which is straight garbage. And so we need people, make the necessary adjustments to start improving diversity, in their workplaces.
Yes, I think that's so important to push out that idea that, like, okay, maybe it's more challenging because you have to step outside of your comfort zone and you have to do some things that you haven't done before, and maybe you have to make some new partnerships or figure out new processes to
Right.
recruit in different ways. But I think it's so important to say, like, hey, just because the whole of the recruitment world right now says that this is the way things are done doesn't mean that that has to be the way things are done. I think that stepping outside of the recruitment comfort zone and trying new things is definitely helpful in the situations that you were just speaking about. I also think it can be incredibly helpful for career changers. And that's something that has been a focus of mine, of course, for the last year since I started really doing that more and got a certification in it, but also that is just becoming more prevalent with job seekers as we go through time and as the job market changes. And what happens is these people are incredibly talented, intelligent, have tons of transferable skills, but because they might not know the best language to communicate that, and B, recruiters don't know and often aren't given the training or given the information of, hey, people that come from this other industry or this other type of job might go really well with the jobs that you're hiring for, that people like that get missed. So I think there's a lot that can be done to make sure that people who are being overlooked for one reason or another, that stops happening, and that recruiters start finding better people and start seeing, like, oh, wow, there are excellent people that I can get out there and hire for these roles. We need to somehow bring the two together and bring that thought process of, okay, how do we step outside of our box? How do we look at other opportunities of people? You mentioned the article about AI helping to sort of eliminate or reduce bias in hiring. And I don't know if it's the same thing, but I just listened to a TEDx talk like yesterday, so I'll send you the link to it, but it was similar, and it was about someone who had come from a less fortunate environment, wasn't born in America, and when her family moved here, they were, very poor and didn't have a lot, but she says that AI really helped her, and she like moved up into the corporate world and has had a really great experience with that. And so now she is sort of pushing for AI more. So I'm interested to see how that comes forth, and if the right people are behind it, then I do think that it can be really valuable. So
Yeah, yeah. If the intentions and the execution are noble and uphold diversity and these ideals, then I'm not against it. I'm not a Luddite and someone who's just anti-technology. I know AI is where things are going, but we can't forget the human factor in all of it, and that we have to try and solve for the fact that we all have. One of the hardest parts of my grad school program was having to surface, identify, and contend my own biases and stereotypes as part of becoming a therapist. We all have them. It's in the air that we breathe. Within whatever society you live in, there are biases and stereotypes and isms of all different types, and they are socialized into us. And so we have to work against our own programming when we are programming an AI, to be better than how we are. And so that's where you need diversity in the room, who's doing the programming, different viewpoints, backgrounds, experiences, all of that, in order to uphold this noble goal of encouraging diversity and really improving the workforce and the hiring process, which for many feels broken right now.
Yep, I've heard that word a lot about the hiring process recently, so I agree with you there. So you mentioned, just kind of being hopeful that these changes that companies are making or saying they're making, that they won't just be surface things and things that they're putting out sort of on the forefront, but then behind the scenes, they're not really doing what they're saying they're doing, things like that. And I agree with you that certainly could be the case, and it certainly could be if we let it be. So what I would love to see, and what I try to bring more awareness too, is the idea that job seekers can make changes and kind of make decisions and do things from their point of view. And especially if it becomes sort of a large community of like-minded people, and job seekers are all kind of saying, hey, this is what we want, or this is what we want to see. I feel like that can help hold, feet to the coals of these companies who could go
Mhm.
either way, but need that push from people to say, hey, no, really, you need to be making these changes and make the workplace a more equitable, diverse place to be.
Mhm.
What tactics or what things do you think that job seekers can do to kind of send that message that, hey, this stuff is important and it needs to be a long lasting, new way that things are done? What can job seekers do to push forward social justice things that they're interested in, or things that they think are important on that end?
Yeah. I think that if job seekers, so they say if consumers vote with their dollars,
Mhm,
then job seekers could maybe vote with their applications, right?
mhm,
And so we would reward companies as job seekers by trying to flock to them because they're doing the right thing as far as social justice is concerned. And
mhm,
so what that could hopefully bring about, with enough momentum, enough, people doing this, is that the companies that are not, walking the walk of actually trying to improve diversity within their ranks, not just by physical appearance, but by the environment that welcomes people and welcomes diversity and allows people to be themselves at work. Companies that are not doing that actual work will lose out in the competition for talent because
mhm,
talent will go elsewhere.
mhm,
And so I think if we need to come up, I'm there are lists of places, great places to work, for that are diverse and all this. Maybe creating a list of the places that aren't great and are not doing,
mm,
their job, and having people, in effect boycott their talent, from those organizations.
mm,
They can pull LeBron James. I'm taking my talent, from you over to wherever it is that's, more supportive of me as a diverse candidate. Um, that's perhaps, one way. And then I think another way could be for the questions job seekers ask of
mm,
companies within interviews. If over and over and over again, let's just use this past year and a half, as an example. How did your company take care of your Black employees during, the social justice uprising over the summer? How did your company support employees during the pandemic? Those are two questions that can really get to the heart of the values their company has. And if their heart is aligned with their actions, and their words, in terms of what they do, with that support. And so if there are, a set of social justice oriented questions that job seekers are continually asking companies, they're going to have to respond at some point.
mhm.
If the last 100 candidates ask
Right.
them, how do you take care of your Black employees? Or how do you supporting, your LGBTQ population within your company? Do individuals who wear hijab or other religious markers, are they comfortable in your workplace? If we
Mm,
keep on asking these questions, then employers will have to sit up and take notice and hopefully do something to, not lose. It sucks that they're gonna have to act in their own self-interest first, but that will get them to start making changes, right? So if they're gonna lose talent, they
yeah.
will start making changes.
Yep. Yep. That makes sense. So, asking the right questions in the interview, I love those questions that you sort of gave and gave examples of. The questions that your client came up with were fantastic as well. And I hope that that gives some people some, just brainstorming ideas to kind of go off of for themselves. Do you think that there is a place for that kind of messaging in a resume, a LinkedIn profile, a cover letter, or do you think that is best kept for one-on-one conversations or interviews, something like that?
That's an interesting question. My inclination is to start with the wishy-washy depends,
Mm,
because there's so many factors that feed
mm,
into it, right?
of course.
Um, if I had to say where to do it if you're going to do it, I would think that your LinkedIn summary, the about section, might be a great place
Right.
because there's enough room to give context and kind of build it into overall career narrative. I'm less inclined to put it in the resume because it's such a targeted tool. And ultimately, it is a sales document to get you in the door for further conversation. So I might be less inclined, unless you're looking for a job in social justice or something that's related, then of
Right.
course you have
Right.
to be big and bold about it, right? So that's one of
Yep.
the depends things, right?
Yep.
What's your target? But if your line of work happens to be in a very buttoned up conservative environment, then maybe leading with your social justice orientation on your resume might not work out so well for you. It shouldn't be that way ideally, let me be clear, but
Yeah.
that's the challenge of it all. Um, I think if, within a one-on-one conversation, that might be the most appropriate place to share your social justice values and things like that. I think you need to read the room, read the
Mhm.
audience, and again, how does it fit into your ultimate goal, landing a job?
Mhm.
And so I want to be clear that I'm not trying to tell people to compromise their values or what they're about, but it's about being strategic in terms of when and how to deploy it.
Mhm.
Because if you are a research scientist and your job is to discover the next, compound that can be exploited for drug production, how important is it for you to, advocate to demonstrate through across your materials that you're a social justice person?
Mhm.
Um, but if it's something that's very important to you, then for sure, be yourself 100% in your materials. And then an employer who also values those things, that will be where the match is made, right? And so I hope I'm not talking in circles 'cause I'm kind of like answering this on the fly out loud. But how important is it to you, to lead with this or make it incorporate into your overall brand? If it's core to who you are, then by all means embrace it and run with it. If it's something that is not core to your function, that may prove challenging if you leverage it in order to get into the job you're trying to get into. For your own self, be strategic and diplomatic about how you deploy it. It doesn't mean you can't do it outside of work. It doesn't mean that you can be a Trojan horse and get into the job and then be like, hey guys, I'm social justice, and really start making change. Once you're in there, my my hope for people is to get in and then make the change. So do what you need to get in, and then make change from there, or just be your full on self if that's important
Mhm.
to you.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think it definitely depends on the situation and the person and so many other variables. But I love the idea that job seekers can have some power and they can feel empowered to hold companies accountable and to make decisions about the companies that they work for based
Hmm.
on how those companies behave on,
Yeah.
global platform or local platform or whatever it is, how they treat their employees, how they, speak and communicate and marketing materials they put out and all of that stuff. So that is really, really excellent. We've talked about the sort of job seeker perspective a lot, and I want to ask you a little bit about if you've seen anything within companies. So, first, let me preface this by saying that this comes from something that you said in a podcast last summer. You were on the
Hmm.
Career Builders podcast with Mike Bird and Lisa Plain, and you were
Hmm.
actually a guest with Rashida Geddes as
Rashida.
well.
Hmm.
Yeah, and you said in that conversation that erasure and minimization and trivialization are a consequence of not having diverse voices in the corporate setting. And I totally agree with you. I think it's pretty just flat out obvious that that's the case
Hmm.
based on
Right.
so many
Hmm.
different instances and events and things that have happened. Have you seen companies doing more to incorporate diverse voices into the corporate setting? Have you seen any instances
um
of that?
I think I'm still in wait and see mode
Mhm,
about what things are going on, because we're still not that far removed from this recent spike in social
mm,
justice orientation. It
mhm,
was this fall, going into the winter, that all the DI consultants were super busy, and
mhm,
so I think maybe 2021, this year, is when we'll start to see, well, what change is actually being made. Some of my favorite tweets, from last year, were around, okay, show us your receipts, show us a picture of your executive board, show us a
mhm,
picture of your board of directors,
mhm,
and that's, where the changes need to start from the top. It's pretty easy to diversify, your the staff level if you make an effort.
mhm.
It's at the top where some of the biggest challenges, are going to come from.
And where some
Um,
of the biggest decisions are made, so where it's probably
yeah.
most important.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the top is super, super important. And so, I think that a lot of companies are starting to be more vocal about their social justice, stances and viewpoints and beliefs. And I think that is positive. I'll hold up Ben and Jerry's as a great example. If you saw their tweet, their Instagram post about what happened in the Capitol, it's so on point.
Mhm.
And if more corporations, kind of took that lead, a lot of change could happen a lot faster because often, the government can be slow to react. But if businesses large corporations are making moves, then the government's like, oh, snap, we need to pay attention, maybe get on this, as well. And so
Yep.
there's a lot of power there for them to lead, with their voices and with their actions. Um, and yeah, so I think that if corporations can not just because the message is one thing, actions are another, right?
Mhm.
But I think that bringing awareness, vocalization, and taking clear anti-racist stands, clear pro-diversity stands, fall backed up by action. If corporations can be more consistent in doing this, then I think we can start to see more changes happening on the corporate side. And just please diversify your leadership, and these things will start to happen, more and more often and better.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, we tie that back to, okay, so corporations have a lot of power and responsibility. Job seekers have the power to hold them to that and to hold them
Hmm.
accountable. That's something that I just really want to push from a whole perspective, not just on social justice, but with everything. Like, choose your applications and where you want to put your talent wisely. So I
Hmm.
really love everything that you've had to say about that.
Thank you.
Um, a question to kind of get things wrapped up here. I've really, really
Hmm.
enjoyed speaking to you today.
Sure.
Get into, what are you most excited or hopeful about in the job search or the career world as we're moving into the future?
Um, I think that the growing number of diverse voices in the career space, I'm really excited about. I started my journey with this business in May of 2019 is when like I officially launched.
Mm,
And until like I met Mark Anthony Dyson, I
mm,
didn't know there were any other Black men who were career
mm.
coaches. I was
Yep.
like, oh man, like am I the only one out here? So big thank you to Mark, for
Yeah.
helping to, even just elevate my profile, give me, some attention on this platform and help me get to where I am. Um, but over time, I'm seeing more and more diverse voices, out there, in addition to my own. And I hope that just continues to be a trend because there's so many perspectives and issues that are not being talked about that need to be discussed. That are going to benefit everyone, though. Because I've heard it said that if the most marginalized in a society are taken care of, then everyone's going to be okay.
Mm,
And so this is not about negativity and how I want to present that, but if there are, perspectives and experiences that are less talked about, that are shared, everyone's going to benefit as far as their career development, their growth, how recruiters work, how corporations work. All these things are going to improve if we invite more and more voices, to contribute and share their wealth of knowledge and experience. Um, I'm also excited that, maybe LinkedIn is becoming more of a place that is open to having some of those hard conversations. Um, because we can't pretend that LinkedIn is not related to society. We
yeah.
can't pretend that, corporations and all these things are completely devoid of isms, whether it's
Mm,
sexism, racism, or what have you, ableism. All these things exist in the corporate world. And so if we're not able to have those conversations on LinkedIn, then what are we doing on that platform, so when, I can't talk about career stuff, I'm going to talk about social justice stuff. Some days I don't want to talk about resumes. Some days I don't want to talk about networking because it's just
yeah.
not that important that day.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm starting to grow into my own comfort, in talking about these things. And I hope more and more people, will grow into that comfort and jump in the conversation. We're all involved in it, no matter what your identity is or identities you hold. We all have a stake in making things better. And so we shouldn't be, shy to, it's not easy, right? But you shouldn't be shy to jump in and learn and do your best while make mistakes along the way. But I hope that LinkedIn will support more and more diverse voices, challenging conversations, and I'm excited for that, for this coming year.
Yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. I think that that's really exciting. It feels almost just a little bit more freeing to know that like the professional world, LinkedIn, companies, career world, all of that is becoming a little bit less stifling and becoming a place where people can feel comfortable kind of being their true selves. So I love that you're excited about that. I certainly am too. I think that is everything that I had for you, Nii Ato. Thank you so much again. Can you share where people can find you or how they can connect with you so that they can continue hearing your awesome content and getting more information from you?
All right, sure. So, of course, right here on LinkedIn, I try to post, as often as I can. I love this little graphic here. Let me point. Avenuecareers.com. I never been to point to anything, so I wanted to do that today.
Yeah, I always
So,
point to the wrong place. I'm like, wait a minute, what
yeah,
is that?
right. So
There
I had to
it
figure it
is.
out. Yeah. So I had to figure that one out just now. I don't do TikTok, so clearly I really, can't get to that, but I had to do my best. So avenuecareers.com is on my website where you can find my blog, learn more about my background, how I can help you. And then I'm also on Instagram, Avenue Careers, and I'm not great at Twitter, but I'm there, Avenue Careers as well, across all social media. So that how you can find me.
That is fantastic. Again, thank you for being here. I absolutely love all the things that come out of your mouth. Everything you have to say seems like it's valuable and really, really helpful for job seekers. So thank you so much. With that, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. I've got a couple more things just to wrap up with. And for anybody who's interested who wants Nii Ato's information, I will put up a screen at the end that's got more contact information for him so you can find him. All right. Thank you
Awesome.
again, Nii Ato. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me, Lezlie. Really appreciate it. It's been fun. Can't wait to do it again.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Let me just go ahead and get rid of this there. All right. Thank you so much for being here. And if you have any questions, you can certainly feel free to reach out to myself or Nii Ato. I will put that information on the end screen. I hope that this conversation has helped you to think more about mindfulness and the power that you really have as a job seeker. I hope that that has helped sort of get some ideas in your head and helped you brainstorm some more. At that, I will just leave you with a quick reminder that next Tuesday for Career Tip Tuesday is Roast My Resume. So I am doing live reviews of real job seeker resumes and giving feedback on improvements that can be made. The name is Roast My Resume, but it's only playfully. It's not going to be anything too damaging or anything like that. It's all playful, but it's just to let other people see the review process and see what other job seekers are doing and what improvements can be made to their resumes and possibly to yours as well. All right, thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and get this graphic up that just has our information. And at that, I will see you next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.